Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. In our today's video, we'll talk about the 28-point peace plan that has been forwarded by the US President Donald Trump in order to end the Russia-Ukraine war. So what are these proposals all about? What are the opinion on these proposals of the important stakeholders? Everything we are trying to understand in our today's video. Now the notes that I will be using in this session, in case if you want to download them, you can go to this particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live, and while you're at it downloading the notes, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel also. Okay, so let us start our today's discussion by understanding the context of our today's development, right? And I told you this new 28-point peace plan that has been forwarded by US after they have been jointly drafted with Russia. This in a way tries to end Russia-Ukraine war in order to get both of these fighting parties to sign a ceasefire deal. But this point process or this deal, as you can understand, negatively impacts Ukraine more as it compares to Russia. So naturally, the reaction from Ukrainian side and also from the European Union side was not very positive, as they were against many provisions that have been highlighted in this point plan. We are going to understand all of these provisions, no need to worry. So there is a possibility that going forward, the US President Donald Trump might lean more heavily towards Ukraine side in order to get them to sign this deal, but they won't sign this deal as easily because many of the points, as I've already told you, negatively impacts Ukraine more. So what are these points all about? We'll find out. But first, let us try to understand or ascertain what kind of questions are asked on this topic. The first kind of questions that come to my mind would straight away lead to it would come from a mapping based questions. So much so that in 2023, a question came on what are the bordering countries of Ukraine. So let us find that one out also. As you can see from this map, Ukraine shares its boundaries with as many as 7 countries, from Russia to Belarus, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary on its western side, Romania, Moldova on its southern side, and in north it was Belarus and in east it was Russia. So all in all, 7 countries share their boundaries with Ukraine. Now let us start our today's discussion by understanding what are the important provisions of these 28-point peace plan. But for paucity of time and for your convenience, I have divided these 28 points into 3 different headings. So let us start with the first heading, that is the territorial concession this peace point plan gives to both Russia and Ukraine. First, you have to understand straight away that a significant portion of Ukraine's territory right now is under Russia's occupation or Russia's control. So much so that these countries are marked in the pink color in this particular map. As you can understand, the territory of Luhansk, Donetsk and Crimea, these are the territory that has been proposed by this plan in order to give them to Russia. So this peace point plan confirms that de facto recognition to Russia's control will be provided to 3 important Ukrainian territories, that is Crimea, Luhansk as well as Donetsk. Now Donetsk here is very important. First of all, Donetsk is a center which is rich in minerals and it is also a regional industrial center for Ukraine. So controlling of this Donetsk territory becomes very important from both Russia's and Ukrainian point of view. So on one hand, this peace point plan gives a de facto recognition or a de facto approval to Russia's occupation of a significant territory of Ukraine, which is almost 20% of total Ukraine geography. Similarly, Ukraine would require to withdraw from the remaining part of Donetsk, which it still controls. Coming back to this map, you will realize there is a significant part of Donetsk which is currently under the possession of Ukraine. So if this peace point plan were to go further, Ukraine would have to withdraw from this territory and this territory would be marked as a demilitarized zone, effectively without having the presence of Russia and Ukraine, but de facto this would be a Russia's territory, right? So that is why you can understand why Ukraine is against such kind of a peace point deal, because it has to give away as much as 20% of its total territory or 25% of its current possession of the territory of Donetsk, right? Now, this peace point plan also envisages establishment of a neutral demilitarized zone, and Ukraine is of the opinion that Russia can use this opportunity to create further aggressions on other territories of Ukraine, which is still under not the control of Russians. So this is why it is a biggest or brightest red line for Kyiv, because in one way it legitimizes, gives a de facto approval to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and at the same time it wants Ukraine to withdraw its army from its own territory, that is about 25% of Donetsk. So these were first kind of concessions, that are territorial concessions. Now let us come back to security guarantees, which is the second point. Now you need to understand what was the trigger point of Russia-Ukraine war. The trigger point of Russia-Ukraine war was NATO's expansion eastwards in order to include and give this membership even to Ukraine. So Russia interpreted this move of Ukraine joining NATO as a security dilemma. So Russia saw this eastward expansion of NATO as a move which would negatively impact Russia's security or national security. So that is why this was the trigger point of Russia-Ukraine war. So in order to mollycoddle Russia, or in order to satiate Russia's demand, this peace point plan put stop to the NATO's expansion eastward with inclusion of a NATO non-expansion clause. And this is noticed. Ukraine will also be required to amend its constitution in order to give recognition that they won't ever take NATO's membership. So this is another point which is a pressure point of Ukraine. Now, Russia, it is expected, it is not guaranteed, that it is expected from Russia to not invade neighbors, which is a non-binding form of this agreement. So one point of contention between Ukraine and US on this matter is that Ukraine won't ever join NATO, and in return US is providing a very vaguely worded security guarantees to NATO. So just remain, there is no clarity on what kind of US led security guarantee would be provided to them, and this in a way can again force Russia to occupy more of the territories. So, in addition to that, this peace point plan also imposes certain caps on how much military Ukraine can maintain, that is cap of 6 lakh troops, and there will also be a further ban on demolishing or even deploying certain military hardwares like jets which belongs to NATO on Ukrainian soil. So these security guarantees also takes care of what Russia wanted, but in another way it does not take care of what Ukraine wanted. Ukraine wanted a permanent security guarantee from US side, but what it got was a vaguely worded security guarantee, right? So this was the second discussion that we had on the 28-point peace plan. As you can see from this map, in the colors dark blue, it has said the countries who joined NATO earlier, and NATO expanded eastward, including this yellow color Ukraine, which was interpreted as Russia as a security crisis, and this was the trigger point which led to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And in order to stop that, the peace point plan agrees that there won't be any expansion of NATO to include Ukraine in it. Okay. Now, third point is the amnesty and the sanctions framework. Now, one of the key arguments of Ukrainian side was that in this war between Russia and Ukraine, the Russian President Vladimir Putin and his generals were involved in several war crimes. So as a method to achieve ceasefire, Ukraine wanted US and other Western nations to impose certain kind of punitive measures on these people for involvement in war crime. But on another hand, this peace point gives full amnesty to all parties for their wartime exaction. So this move has been interpreted by Ukraine as that it would set a future precedent, a negative example of paving a way for future Russian aggression, because there is nothing that would prevent Russia from doing aggression on Ukrainian territory. Now, US on another hand wants to integrate Russia into world economy, and what prevents this integration of Russian economy into world economy is the Western sanctions that have been imposed after the start of Russia-Ukraine war. So as a way to satiate Russia, as a way to also satiate Ukraine, the US has said that we will relax the sanctions that we have imposed, provided that you can't commit future aggressions. But here also Ukraine has a problem. Ukraine says that first of all, your economic sanctions were not very foolproof. Had it been foolproof, it would have meant a stop of Russia-Ukraine war. What we have seen, this has been continuing since the year 2023. So this is another point of contention. Ukraine says that your sanctions regime were not very effective, so what's the point of withdrawing them? And on another hand, US is trying to withdraw the sanction regime as a as you can say, a lollipop, as an incentive for Russia not to commit any future aggressions on Ukraine. So this was the third kind of a point, or sanctions and amnesty framework. Now, the biggest point or biggest question that you might think, what is in it for US or Russia to stop this war, right? They must be getting something out of this deal, right? It is actually true, because nobody goes to war without any benefit, and similar way nobody would stop a war without getting any monetary or incentives. So what are these incentives for Russia and Ukraine? Let us start this. First, let us talk about US. The ultimate goal of US right now is to contain the rise of China, and as we have seen after the invasion of Crimea in 2014 and after the invasion of Ukraine in 2023, when Russia invaded these territories of Ukraine, as a method of sanction, US imposed economic sanctions on Russia. So this forced Russia to join hands with China, and they became heavily dependent on China for its energy, tech as well as finance needs. So this was a point of contention for US. Although they have imposed sanctions on Russia, but in a way this acted in favor of China because it strengthened China. And the ultimate aim of US in the area of Eurasia is that no single power other than US should become dominant in the region. But what happens in active cooperation of Russia? China became a dominant player in the Eurasian region. So they wanted to break this Russia-Chinese nexus, and the best way to break this Russia-Chinese nexus is to relax economic sanctions on Russia, because if US were to relax economic sanctions on Russia, this would help reintegrate Russian economy into Western economy. This would offer Russia the commercial and technological partnership with the West, and it would pull Moscow away from the Chinese influence. So this was why US wanted this peace deal to happen, because it wanted to break the nexus that currently exists between Russia and China. Now, what's in it for Russia? As you can understand, as this war moved forward, there were certain contradictions that became very public. And Russia right now believes that time is with them, because first of all, Ukraine has faced fatigue due to this war. It is under constant demographic pressures. People are not willing to fight. People are looking towards normalcy, and this has put Ukrainian government under pressure. Similarly, the Western unity that we saw earlier on, that they used to support Ukraine, is now weakening. So much so that US is on one side, and Ukraine as well as European Union is on another. They are actually fighting among themselves how to support this Ukraine war. So based on this assumption, Russia wanted this war to continue. But if this war would have continued, Russia would have brought in under several or severe economic stress. What happens when economic pressure persists on Russia? The sanctions, they stress their industrial sector for a long time, and if Russia were to return or reintegrate with Western economy, this would mean the present G7 would turn back into G8, and therefore it would let Russia get several investment from the West in its own industrial sector, and this is what Russia wants. So Russia wants to end this war in order to ease out on the economic pressure that it is currently subjected to because of Western economic sanctions, not because of the war, right? Now, what is the opinion of European Union, or what is Europe's position on this point deal? We also need to understand this. Now, I need to certain one thing, that Ukraine, or for that matter European Union, has a very deep ingrained distrust of Russia. So they are very much against the territorial concession this peace point offers to Russia. But on another hand, they have also feared that US for longer period of time is looking to abandon the security guarantees it offers to European Union. So in a past few years, you will realize the kind of strategic autonomy that European players wants, prominently France, has increased, which is in the same line of what India wants. So abandoning or fearing this abandonment of US of European Union, they have wanted to have a more strategic autonomy, and in this region they agreed to give more financial and technological support to Ukraine in order to fight this war. But they have of late realized one important fact, that how much monetary or technological or military support they offer to Ukraine, they won't ever be in a position to fully replace the aid that US provides to Ukraine. So that is why, although they have deep distrust of Russia, but they are looking one way or the other in order to end this conflict, right? Now, before ending our today's discussion, it becomes also very important for us to discuss what will be the implications of this impending ceasefire deal on Indian foreign policy. First of all, you need to understand that because of this Russia-Ukraine war, India tried to exploit the situation. India tried to get the best deal out of this situation, which any country is liable to do it. India tried to import cheaper Russian crude oil, which was available for cheap because Russia was under several economic sanctions. Now, what happened because of this India's decision to buy cheaper Russian crude oil? US imposed tariffs on India for buying Russian oil in order to force Russia to sign the ceasefire deal. Now, if this ceasefire deal were actually to happen, India would benefit positively. First of all, if US-Russia relations stabilize, India won't be under pressure to choose one against the another, and it can go forward buying Russian oil without any threat of US sanctions. Similarly, as I told you, because of these sanctions, Russia became very close to China, and this affected India negatively. So theoretically, less dependence of Russia on China would ease out on pressures with respect to India and Chinese relationship. So India, it would become favorable for India in areas of line of actual conflict, that is LAC, or even the Indian Ocean region. So in a way, India's foreign policy accepts the coming together of US and Ukraine, but it does not accept the coming together of US and China. So what would happen in this peace deal? That US and Russia would become closer, and this would pull Russia away from the influence that is there with China. And this is what India is wanting, and this is not what India wants. So this is why the implication for India because of this ceasefire deal would be largely positive. So what should be India's foreign policy like? We need to understand India going forward should look at every opportunity in order to avoid becoming a collateral in fight of great powers. What happened right now? India was buying crude oil with Russia, and US used this excuse to impose punitive tariffs on India. Similarly, India should also look to enhance its national power. As the historical examples like right now the Russia-Ukraine war suggest, we can't depend on another's support to fight our own wars. And in order to deal with our own challenges, it is our own challenges, and we have to fight it by enhancing our national power, making our economy more strong, and focusing on technology and military security. Similarly, if you have read the book by Dr. S. Jaishankar called as India Way, he said a very good thing in that book. He said that whenever there is a conflict between great powers, or wherever the situation between great powers become fluid, we should look to exploit this opportunity. And this is what happened due to Russia-Ukraine war. As I told you, India started importing cheaper crude oil from Russia just because of this conflict. And this is a situation which shows realist impact on India's foreign policy. And this should be the way if we have to deal with the crisis that happens in global world order. Okay. So this was all for today's discussion. Before solving the practice question, let us discuss something very important. This pertains to our P2I foundation batches. Now the topic I just covered forms a topic of GS paper 2, that is the international relations. But what about other subjects? If you want to know about other subjects in similar detail like we have today, much in greater detail for that matter, you can take admissions in our P2I foundation courses. These courses are open for admission for both students who are looking to give exams in 2027 or in 2028. But before making the payment, if you utilize this code ATS Live, it will help you fetch maximum discounts not on just these P2I foundation courses but also on optional subjects. So please remember, you have to learn to thrive by using the code ATS Live. Now, before ending our today's discussion, this is the PYQ I was talking about. Which of these countries share their land borders with Ukraine? Please do let me know the correct answers in the comment section. The ones who answer it correctly would get a thumbs up from my side. So this is all from my side for today's discussion. Please have a very good night, and this is where you can find the notes on the channel ATS Live. And if you have troubles locating it, you can always scan the QR code. So I'll see you again tomorrow. Please have a very good night.